Welcome back to another episode of the Evo 6 STI Killer presented by Koyo Rad. Today we are going to take this and stuff it back in the hole.
Well, it's time to get this party started, everyone, and we think the first step to take here is actually going to be to mock up our new wiring harness. This is from Ohm Racing, that's OHM Racing, and they make very high-grade mil-spec or motorsport spec wiring harnesses like this one. And just to kind of describe to you how compact and lightweight this is compared to the OE harness, well, maybe we'll show you the OE harness in a second, but this is incredibly light and simplified, and the flexibility of it is really quite remarkable. And that's because when he builds this harness, he uses mil-spec wiring, which is Teflon coated, which has a much thinner coating on it, which you might think compromises it, but it's actually, that Teflon coating is actually much more heat resistant, much more abrasion resistant than normal automotive grade wiring. And because it's thinner, it's more flexible. You can bundle it up like he has here and can concentrically twist it, like you may have seen racing harnesses done, where they twist the whole bundle of wire, and that gives it this amazing flexibility. And that allows us to route this however we like. And this is actually designed to be a tucked harness. So this is their Evo 4 to 6 tucked mil-spec wiring harness. They do make harnesses for other applications, all the DSM and Evo stuff, as well as R32 GTR and Mark IV Supra. As you can see, we've asked them to include this mil-spec connector that's going to go on the firewall, which has turned this into a two-piece harness. As you may recall, the OE harness was this giant one-piece mess from the engine all the way into the cabin. It was a disaster trying to get it out of there. So this will allow us to easily disconnect the engine harness from the chassis harness. You might be asking yourselves, why are you upgrading from the OE harness to something like this? Well, we're going to expose this harness to a lot more heat by virtue of that big manifold that we're putting on there and all the boost we're going to run through this motor. So we wanted something that's really designed to stand the test that this motor is going to throw at it. And that OE harness is 20 years old, so we don't really know how worn the wiring is inside that old loom. So it just made sense to us to get a clean start, since everything else here is a clean start too. So this is a big upgrade. You can see he's even put these loops in the end here, which is like a strain relief loop here. So you're not going to risk pulling out the connectors. It's all crimped using motorsports grade hydraulic crimping, so there's no solders in here. That is a start on your Ohm Racing harness, and thank you very much, Ohm Racing, for doing this. I know adding this this here was a bit of complexity to the job, so thank you going the extra mile for us. And you guys go check them out, ohmracing.com. It's ohm-racing.com. They make the good stuff. Just plug in our last sensor here. That is our water temp sensor, which, by the way, we've added. This is an AEM sensor that we've added in here, and we've added a few other sensors which Ohm Racing was kind enough to add wiring in for us ahead of time. So we told them what we were planning to add. He added all of that in for us. You can see under here we have a map sensor. This is an AEM stainless steel map sensor, and it's worth mentioning that there is a difference between the way a brass sensor and a stainless steel sensor works. The way AEM describes it, which I think is quite a good analogy, is a ruler compared to, say, a caliper. So a ruler gives you a good general measurement tool, but if you want more precision, a finer grade measurement, then you go to a caliper, and that's really what the stainless steel sensors are. They're more precise. They give you a higher resolution data source. So if you're using that data to tune your ECU like you are with a map sensor, you really want to go stainless steel. But if you're sending something that isn't a critical data point for your engine management, like water temperature, then you can use a brass one, and it can, the ECU can still use that for, warning lights and so on, or you can use it on a separate gauge. But it's not a critical data point for mapping your, ignition and fuel timing and all that kind of stuff the way the map sensor is. So that's why you would go stainless versus brass on the sensors. Otherwise, the harness fits up beautifully.
Oh, it was so easy to install. Everything's labeled. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I should have mentioned everything is labeled, so it's super easy to find its home. And man, it fits on there so well. I think we're just going to leave it on there. It's not going to present any problems for installing the motor. Just getting ready to feed the chassis harness through the firewall here, and just noticing how Ohm Racing was kind enough to ray cam all of this stuff, even though it's inside the car and it's not going to be exposed to the same kind of high heat and all that. But he's organized it all really nicely with zip ties. He's really given it the full treatment. This is obviously the firewall plug. And these wires go into the engine bay, and you can see he's labeled all these. We've got battery, wiper, ABS. And there you have it. The plug is snapped into the firewall much easier than I thought it would, and now you get a good visual on how valuable this disconnect here is to us, because it allowed us to feed that chassis harness through the firewall and plug it into the firewall really very painlessly. That took us maybe 5 minutes. And Pete just threw in a new fuel filter. I wanted to mention though that I lovingly stripped the rust off of this bracket and painted it along with a lot of other brackets when we did that whole cleanup, thinking we were going to reuse this bracket, which normally lives on the firewall like this, I think, in this area, and that is where the fuel pump relay and another relay. Anyway, 2 fuel related relays live on this bracket, and turns out they're not going to live there anymore because Ohm Racing designed them to be relocated to the inside, which just cleans up the whole firewall. You get rid of all this mess on the firewall.
Oh, it's so brilliant, yeah.
So this is gone, my work gone with it. But now I think we are actually ready to put the engine in there.
Big moment here. Engine transmission is back in, and it was a little finicky. We definitely struggled a little bit, right, DP?
Yeah.
It was just a matter of like getting it aligned, and like we're putting the subframe up, and the subframe has the front and back points, and then there's like the engine mounts on the side here that have to go on. So it requires a little bit of back and forth here, but for the most part, not that difficult a job. So now that we have this in, we're just gonna go through and quickly connect small things like the shift linkage. I think there's some power steering lines. We're gonna torque all the engine and transmission mounts and all the small little things.
The engine in place and the subframe torqued in. We are just waiting on the manifold to come back from coating. So while we wait on that, we are going to finish building out our suspension and brakes, starting with these lower control arms, which you can see Pete has already pressed in our Super Pro bushing, as well as into this this location that goes on the back of the arm here. And we've talked with you guys about the Super Pro stuff before, but just to recap quickly, we have found them to be exceptionally good as far as controlling NVH goes. Typically with like old-fashioned poly bushings, we always found them to ride really harsh, and yes, they take a lot of play out of that joint and thus improve, you know, suspension geometry and all that, but there was always a big compromise with NVH, or, you know, noise, vibration, and harshness. And we find with the Super Pro stuff, they've done an exceptionally good job of engineering these bushings in a way that they don't add much NVH. So you can gain all of the benefits of a stiffer joint without a lot of the downsides. I'm assuming in this case the car will ride a little bit stiffer than stock, but through the way they choose the durometer, and they actually design them, each joint is engineered separately, and they can have multiple durometers happening within one bushing. So they give you some initial compliance, and then they stiffen up as that joint is loaded. So there's a lot of engineering that goes into these bushings. These are not just like plug the hole with blue poly and call it good. If you want more information on that, I would encourage you to jump over onto Super Pro's site. But I'm going to write a story about it too, because I'm really fascinated by the amount of engineering they've done. So we'll throw a link in the description once I get around to writing that story. Might be a little while before that. With that lower control arm in place and torqued to spec, it is time to install our KW Club Sports, same as we installed on the rear. If you've been following along, this will come as no surprise. This is their two-way Club Sport, meaning it has independent adjustability for rebound on the top and compression on the bottom. And we have set them to KW's recommended starting settings. So in this case, that means 5 clicks from full stiff for rebound, and I think it was 6 clicks from full compression on there. You got 12 total compression, 16 total rebound to choose from. As you can see, we've got these beautiful billet camber plates on top with a spherical bearing in here. And we've got obviously a mainspring with a keeper spring. We're using their off-the-shelf spring rates. And like all of KW's stuff, it comes in this really nice stainless steel shock body, which will never corrode on us. So a great shock body for the environment that we live in. And as we know from experience with these KW Club Sports, these are an exceptional product for track day cars. Like we run them on our FRS and on our STI, and well, actually the STI was rebuilt to I think V3 spec, so I may be wrong there, but in any case, we found the Club Sports to be really a great product for both track use and street use. I think they probably ride just like a hair harsher than V3s, but I find them still to be a very streetable setup. And in this case, they were tuned on the Nordschleife, the Nürburgring, with a what they call a track day tire, which I would assume to mean like a 100 to 200 tread wear tire, which is exactly what we're going to be running on this car. So I think this is really a perfect setup on the car. Got our Club Sport bolted in the top here, and I should mention I set the ride height to the recommended ride height from KW's instructions, which are excellent. They give you all kinds of exact places to measure from to set your ride height with a recommended range. So they really do a good job of helping you set these up for like a baseline setup, and we found their baseline setups to be very good. I know from past experience that setting their into the middle of their recommended ride height range gives us a really nice, street-friendly ride height. The car's still lowered, but there will be a little bit of wheel well gap, but very practical setup for the rough roads we have here. This is, by the way, for an Evo 8, and this being an Evo 6, there is a small difference here that you have to account for, and that comes down to these camber bolts, or your main strut bolts. This is the Evo 8 size bolt, and this is the Evo 6 size bolt. And you should be able to see there that the Evo 8 one is a larger diameter bolt than the Evo 6 one. And there's two ways you can deal with it. You can either hog out the knuckle to accept the larger bolt and use the Evo 8 bolt. We looked at that and we're like, not that keen on hogging that out because there isn't that much metal in that area on the knuckle. So we think the smarter play is to actually get these adapters, which slide inside this housing here and reduce the diameter of that bolt hole. And you can then use, I think I have that inside upside down, but then you can use the smaller diameter Evo 6 size bolt. Next up, we're replacing our tie rod ends. As you can see, this one's puking grease and the boot is all cracked and failing on it because it's probably, if it's not the original one, it's old. So that's going in the bin. And in its place, we're installing these hard race bump steer correcting outer tie rods. We got these from Hard Race Canada, and as you can see, it's got this like high quality alloy body on it, and it's actually a fair bit deeper. I don't know if that's to give you extra adjustability or if it's just designed differently than the OE one, but it means we're going to have to do a little bit of alignment work, but not a big deal. I also like the fact that they use a spherical bearing in the outer joint here with a big heavy duty rubber boot on it.
Yeah, that's the
Look at
awesome
that
thing.
boot.
Yeah,
That is really nice.
good for street use, right?
Yeah, I think so, especially in our climate. And as I mentioned, it does correct for bump steer on a lower car. So the way this is designed, it's meant to put the steering rod back in parallel with a lower control arm, which is where it wants to be OE. So this will eliminate the bump steer issues that you can get when lowering your car. So I'll just thread this guy on here, and in a future episode, you will see this car get aligned, but we're still a little ways off from that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Look at that, everybody. We have this corner fully assembled and it's looking awfully good. Some of you might be tweaked slightly by the rust that we left on here, but what are you gonna do, Pete? We can't restore every inch of this car, can we?
No, we can't.
Not
we
if
really
we want to
can't.
drive it this year anyway, but it is looking fantastic. And why don't we start with the calipers, which are of course the OE calipers, but they are looking completely new because we sent them down to detective coatings in the States Where are they located, Pete?
Virginia.
Virginia, okay. And you can obviously get this powder coating treatment in a variety of colors. He uses a high temp sticker on here, so that's not going to come off even during track use, which is pretty awesome. He completely disassembles them. I've got the other side here, and you can see, if you look inside here, you can see what a good job he does taping all the critical areas off. He's rebuilt them, so it's got like new seals in there. It is like a fully reconditioned caliper with a new coating on it. You can send them down your core to save money, although I think you can also buy them without sending a core. Obviously, they cost more if you do that. In any case, Pete, why black? Just because?
Yeah,
Being stealthy
I thought
again?
subtle. Yeah, I wanted something different. When you see the wheels, you'll understand.
Okay. I like the black. It's a nice look. And it complements our StopTech rotor. This is, of course, a StopTech Sport rotor, which we tend to use on everything these days. Same rotor that we put on our STI. And these are a very high quality rotor that can take track abuse. We've put these through the ringer on a bunch of our cars, and they've stood up extremely well to it. As for what we loaded inside the calipers, we went with StopTech Sport pads, which we found to be a really good all-purpose brake pad, meaning both street duty and track duty. If I pop the box open here, actually, I'll quickly show you some of their like street-friendly features. Include the fact that they have these chamfered edges and that gas port down the middle, all of which are designed to help them behave quietly the way you want a street pad to behave. And the compound itself is designed to work really well when cold, which again is a characteristic you want in a street pad. But they also take quite a lot of heat, which you need at the racetrack. So we found on our own cars, we can run these hard for 3 to 5 laps without any sign of brake fade. So we've never really torture tested them to see how much further they can go beyond that. But I know they're very popular with autocrossers, and we think they're a great light track duty pad as well. So a true dual purpose pad in our view. And I also really like them that they're not dusty and they're not noisy, where some of the other like dual purpose pads on the market can be dusty and noisy, where I find these are quite low dust and very low noise. So big fan of the Sport pad. And we also put some shims in there, you may have noticed, which I'll show you quickly here. These are from a company called An6 Designs, and they make a bunch of products with like high-end materials in them, including titanium, like these shims. And these are basically going to act as like a heat shield between the caliper and the pad. So these should help, keep our pad temperatures down and allow these sport pads to last longer at the racetrack. So I think that's a pretty cool little upgrade. Out back, you're going to see more of the same. We didn't install these back when we put the rear suspension in because we were still waiting for these to come back from Detective Coatings. But as you can see, same black gloss finish with the same high temp sticker on it. Same nice job taping everything off on the inside with new seals and all that. And we, of course, also have StopTech Sport rotors, braided brake lines, and sport pads going in the back. So that's going to go all back there now. And that's going to officially make this car a roller, Pete. I think it's at the point where we could put this thing on the ground. We're not going to put it on the ground, though, because we still have a lot of work to do underneath, don't we? There's the whole...
the whole hot side, yeah.
The intercooler setup. There's a bunch of plumbing on top that needs to do. I mean, we've just kind of bolted it in there and done a little bit of plumbing, but there's still a lot of work to go. So I think for today, we are going to call this episode a wrap. And going forward, you may notice things change a little bit, at least over the next few weeks. We are, of course, dealing with this whole COVID situation like everyone else around the world is, and we are going into a work from home scenario, or at least work without contact with other people scenario. So I think what we're going to do is Pete's going to come in here in the shop by himself and work away on this project. And then when he's at home, say editing videos, I'll come in and work on the Celica. We may do some, maybe some live streaming from home. So we're going to come up with some interesting strategies to keep the content flowing while we're in this sort of separated mode of work. We do have some interesting stuff coming for you, though, and I think it'll be fun to see what Pete can do without me here getting in the way, and maybe what I can do without Pete getting in my way. So stay tuned, everyone. Hope you enjoy. Thank you for all the support, and if you're looking to give us a little boost during these pandemic times, by all means, jump on our Patreon page. We're just patreon.com/Speed Academy, and throw us a few bucks, and that'll keep us going here, everybody. Thank you again. I should mention we've got some pretty amazing fans, and your support comes in all shapes and sizes, including ball joints. These Evo 6s use a pretty unique ball joint style that is held in by a bolt that passes through in the knuckle, and they're really hard to come by. And Nicholas Ouellette sent us these. He saw that we needed them, and he had some brand new OE ones in stock and sent them down here just because he's a fan and he wants to see this car. Maybe give the STI a run for its money. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to beat the STI, everybody. I can't do it, but Thank you, Nicholas, for your support, and thanks to the rest of you guys for all the great comments and feedback. We really do appreciate it.